Hey everybody, got some people coming in. Feel free to ask us a few times here in the next few minutes, but feel free to go ahead and jump in the chat and introduce yourself. Vincent, first in. All right. Philadelphia, New Jersey. Philly, Ohio. We've got all the big representation from the battleground states here. It's great. All right, so we'll give it like one more minute and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started while we're waiting for the rest of the people to join us. So hello everybody, I'm Bill Conforti. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our all new virtual discussion series where our goal is to bring together association professionals with industry leaders and partners to bring value to the community through discussions, expert panels, product overviews, and other educational sessions to help your association through these challenging times. Of course, we hope to do that in ways that are fun and engaging. We'll rely on your participation to help us do that and hopefully learn from each other in the process. So these webinars are bi-weekly. We meet on Thursdays, and all the recordings are going to be available for those who register. So today's session is about practical data visualization for association professionals. We're going to touch on some strategy, some planning. Of course, we'll dive into some visualization building. And we'll also talk a little bit about taking your association's Viz game and overall data culture to the next level. As always, I'd love to hear from you. We've already seen some things going on in the chat, but do use the chat to connect with others. And the Q&A button, you can use that as well to submit questions for our panel. All right. Speaking of panel, let's do some quick introductions. Today, we're very lucky to be joined by Ginny Graves. She's our very own senior product owner here at Association Analytics. So in addition to being a hands-on developer of our product, she also keeps the whole product development process running smooth. And I'm not sure what we would do without Ginny on our team. Also have our good friend, Matt Braun. So he's joining us from the Specialty Food Association. So SFA is a member-based trade association that represent more than 3,500 specialty food artisans, importers, retailers, and others that are involved in the specialty food trade. He's a data enthusiast and Power BI rockstar that is joining us for the second time to share his expertise in data visualization. So Matt is always happy to help. So if you see anything interesting, you want to reach out to Matt, I'm sure he'd be glad to hear from you. So with that, a couple of quick questions for our panelists just to kind of kick things off. I'm going to ask them to add anything they'd like to the intro so far, and also to include their most memorable Halloween costume and their favorite candy that they used to go after as trick-or-treaters when they were kids. So we're going to start with Ginny.
Okay, thanks, Bill. I think you about summed it up in terms of what I do here at A2, in addition to doing a lot of development on the product. So if you're an Acumen user, some of the reports that you are most likely using are things that I played a big role in developing. But then I also oversee our overall product development process and product enhancement process. In terms of favorite or most memorable Halloween costume and favorite candy, so I live in Chicago, and usually around this time of year, it's quite cold and it's common to have snow on Halloween. And after years as a little kid having to bundle up and put coats and hats and scarves on over my Halloween costumes, I decided to lean into it. And one year I went as a Beanie Baby and essentially wore a fleece onesie, and it was very warm and I was very comfortable. And if I recall, that was quite a cold year. And then favorite candy would probably have to be peanut M&Ms, and it's still a favorite to this day.
All right. Cool. So same question for you, Matt. And while they're doing that, I'd love to hear from everybody else. I mean, it's now's the time to be thinking about those things. So favorite costumes, favorite candies, anything like that. Let's get the chat going.
Sure. I'm definitely going favorite costume because I did it with a group of my friends. This was post-college, early 20s. And we, as an entire group, went out as WWF, WWE now, wrestlers. I unfortunately was tagged with being the one woman in the group, so it was kind of funny. But we went out, somebody was The Rock, somebody was Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I went out as China. And if anyone knows what China looks like, she is quite large, dark jet black hair, but it was quite funny. Favorite candy, I definitely gonna push the envelope here because I know it's a toes the line on what people like it or do. It's a love-hate relationship. I'm gonna have two of them. One is definitely Reese's peanut butter cups, and two, I am a large fan of candy corn, and there are a lot of people I know that do not like it.
Wow.
So it's a sensitive subject for most people. So.
All right. Yes. If you have any pictures of that, you got to make sure to share it with Matt Lesnick. He's for those of you that don't know Matt, he's our senior VP of technology, biggest adult wrestling fan I've met so far. So I'm sure he'd love to take a look at this.
Yeah, there's definitely something on social media because somebody, I mean, it was posted a couple of years ago, when Halloween came up. So it's definitely there. I just have to find it.
All right, cool. All right, so moving on, let's take a quick look at the agenda. So we're gonna have a quick intro, which is basically, like why we're covering these topics today. I won't spend a long time on that because I'm sure most of you are already clear on this. All right, we're gonna cover 3 keys to success in using data for decisions. This is gonna be, kind of high level key points. Matt's going to jump into a really cool practical demonstration, kind of starting from the approach to going through the planning and the building and the presenting of the data. And then Ginny's going to come back and she's going to show us how to, not only how to get started, but how to take it all to the next level. And we'll, kind of preview some of the things that, that she keeps in mind when we're developing products that are supposed to be used, across entire organizations. So we'll look at some resources that are going to be good for people of all skill levels to get started with things like this, and then we'll wrap up with some of your questions and answers. Okay. So one quick thing before we do that, usually like to have a poll question or two in our webinars. So this one is just for fun. Here we're talking about quarantine dress codes, and Brian, if you could put the poll up for us. Are you a pajamas or sweats kind of person? Athleisure, right? For those of us that are a little bit more stylish. Business on top, party on the bottom. That's my usual. It's my usual choice. And business casual, right? So that just means you're kind of dressed more or less the same way you would if you went to work. And if you're in that category, then good for you. All right, I think that's long enough. Let's check it out. All right, okay. Surprisingly few with pajamas or sweats, right? But as expected, business on top, party on the bottom is probably the winner. I definitely have sweats on the bottom today. And business casual. So as I said, good for you for all of you that are kind of making the effort to go business casual. That's great. All right. So then one other quick poll question. It's actually a little bit more relevant to the topic, which is this is a fill in the blank. So our association always, often, sometimes, rarely, or never uses data analysis and visualization tools to monitor performance and make business decisions. So those of you that have been on our webinars before, we've asked, kind of a variation of this question a few different times. So we'll be see how this group compares to previous times. Okay, let's check it out. Sometimes, okay. Rarely and never. Okay, yeah. So we got always and never. Those are kind of the extremes around the same. Often, checking in at 19%. I think that's pretty good. So we have, basically, 60% that often or sometimes use visualization tools to make decisions. So that is that's great. There's gonna be a lot of tips actually for people in those two categories in today's presentation. I think you'll find some of the resources useful and of course, some of the practical tips that Matt's going to go through as well. And then also for those that are in the last two, the rarely and never, I will give you some tips on how to get started as well. So with all of that, thanks for your participation in the polls. I'm going to turn things over to Ginny.
Thanks, Bill. So before we get into the meat of our presentation today, I just wanted to frame and level set why we're talking about this. So, one of the reoccurring themes of our webinar series that we've been doing for the last few months has been the need to use data and analytics to achieve organizational outcomes, especially in today's environment. And research from EY has found that during the COVID pandemic, we've seen an acceleration in our 10 key technology trends. One of them specifically around the business intelligence stack and data and analytics. So keeping that in mind, what we're recognizing that, us at Association Analytics has long been pitching, but what we're really seeing is that business intelligence and a robust data and analytics strategy is moving from a nice to have in terms of business operations to a must have. So want to just set that and keep that in mind for us all as we go through the rest of the presentation, because what we're really trying to do is help you set yourself up in your organization for success in that area.
Sorry.
Trying to advance for, there we go. Nope. Okay. So if you're just getting started with data and analytics right now, or maybe you're realizing that your data strategy needs some revamping, or maybe this is something that you've been doing for a while, but you're just looking for a few friendly reminders. This is just outlining some of the business issues and pain points that we're seeing frequently in the market that are being improved through data and analytics. So things like reducing manual reporting work, being able to do more with fewer resources. Particularly important right now is being able to uncover new revenue streams or identify underperforming revenue streams. Provide a holistic enterprise view about the organizational health of your company. And then also look at specific things like driving your overall company strategy, or maybe thinking about how you can improve your user content to engage with your users in a more meaningful way. But ultimately, the thing that all of these themes have in common is that data and analytics and a data and analytics strategy gives you the confidence to make the decisions that you are going to need to help you right now. So if we want to move on, yes, thank you. So just as the pandemic has created a new normal for a lot of different areas of our lives, it's also changed the way that we have to approach analytics. So before we get into some of the more practical examples, I just want to cover some keys to success around using data to drive decision-making in the COVID-19 era and beyond. So the first thing is that data doesn't need to be perfect. And I want you to bear with me a little bit on that, because I know that that's a pretty, blunt statement. But what I mean is that oftentimes we wait around for the so-called perfect data before we're willing to do the work to make a decision and analyze it. And in our current environment, we're seeing the need to pull together data much more quickly and make decisions much more quickly. And if you were on our webinar last week with David DiLorenzo from Association Analytics and Patrick Glazer from McKinley Advisors, they touched just on that and the speed of which decision making has increased over the past few months. So knowing that we have to make decisions faster, that means that oftentimes we have to do with what we have today. And that's where I get into the idea of perfect data. We can't just sit and wait for a specific data point when a proxy will do. So I do want to point out that imperfect data does not mean the absence of data quality, but rather what I mean is that oftentimes we have really high quality data that are in our data warehouses or that we've used historically that is very close to what we're looking for. So for example, we might be wondering why a specific individual attended our webinar, and maybe we're wishing that we had asked some questions at the time of registration for the webinar or done some sort of poll during the webinar to understand why specific individuals signed up for that. And we don't have that information, so we feel like we can't make a decision related to the types of webinar offerings. However, we have information about all of our webinar attendees' organizations, their job titles, the functional areas they work in, past webinar attendance, past webinar or past other product purchases. And by triangulating all of that information together and making some assumptions, we can get to a really close understanding of why that individual may have attended the webinar without specifically having a data point that asked them. So really what I think is, as we think about making decisions in a short time frames and in this new environment, what we really need to rely on is the ability to think creatively about how we can use third-party data, how we can use proxy variables, and then how we can make sound assumptions in order to make the best decisions possible using the best combinations of available and high quality data. The next key to success is balancing short-term and long-term metrics. So traditionally, we're looking at tracking progress to a specific goal or target, and oftentimes those are reflected in key performance indicators that oftentimes are looking at how we're progressing towards a specific goal over a year or maybe 2 or 3 years. And it's very common to have those longer time frames for KPIs. However, right now we're in such a volatile environment that oftentimes we really need to be able to track incremental progress over shorter periods of time, like months and quarters. So rather than focusing on long-term KPIs, what we need to be doing more going forward is focusing on short-term KPIs that is allowing us to see that progress over smaller time periods. So as you're thinking about your analytics strategy right now, think about how if you are using short-term KPIs right now, and if not, how you can expand your use of them and how they can fit into your overall goals and metrics. And one thing that I'll note is that if that sounds a little bit scary and a little bit of a big deviation from what you're doing today, a good short-term indicator is going to tie directly to your long-term indicator. So you're still going to have a good sense of if you're on track for those longer targets if you're doing shorter target tracking as well. And then finally, redefining success. So the baseline references and data points that we've historically been using to define what is progress or what is our goal or what does success look like, they're a lot less relevant today as our environment is changing and so uncertain. So this is a little bit scary, but it also presents a great opportunity to think about new definitions of success and also think about new baseline references, baseline metrics and reference points. Also, it's a really great opportunity to get rid of historical baseline metrics and reference points that aren't working for your organization anymore. And one thought too is, as you're thinking about new ways to define and track progress, is again to make sure it's flexible and to think about how you can have more of a short run time element to it. So maybe instead of tracking towards a specific number, you're tracking towards a range, or you're tracking towards a general trend, as opposed to, a specific rate or something like that. So those are just a couple of things to keep in mind as you're thinking about data and analytics and how it's fitting into your organization today.
Awesome. Hey, just really quick, I just want to jump in for a sec as we transition to the next. If you see it's kind of small at the bottom of the screen, The source there, these 3 keys to success are part of an article that Ginny had published with ASAE recently. So there's a little bit more detail on that online. So I encourage you to go and find that article.
Yeah, thanks, Bill, for mentioning that. Definitely recommend it. There's also some information in there about data culture that we're not touching on today. So definitely recommend checking it out. Okay, but today we're talking about practical applications, specifically around data visualization. And before we get more into that topic, I do want to briefly touch on how data analytics and visualizations all fit together and why we care about this topic. So visualizations, or, you may hear Matt and I refer to them as vizzes, charts, graphs, they're all interchangeable, but they are a big part of what Microsoft has called the evolution of Power BI. And the slide here is kind of showing that. So, if we think about, or I'm sorry, not the evolution of Power BI, the evolution of business intelligence. So if we think about business intelligence historically, there's this first wave, which is really IT to a specific end user. Oftentimes this looks like having a single or a few individuals at an organization running very specific queries, pulling very specific reports for a handful of end users on request. And then second is where you have a few more people involved working horizontally across an organization to help staff understand and interpret data. Often this is called self-service business intelligence. You may have somebody like Matt, our speaker, who's really good at distilling data down into meaningful insights and then telling a story and then distributing that information to the rest of the organization. But our real goal is this third wave, which is data to everyone, essentially. So in this wave, we still have analysts and individuals that are specializing in work around data, but everyone in the organization has access to an integrated, trusted data source. And success in this third wave really relies on visualizations and having visualizations that cater to the idea that all business users are the audience. So with that in mind, the rest of the webinar is really going to focus on how to accomplish this third wave effectively through the lens of data visualization. And our goal is to be able to provide you with practical applications that you can take away and apply to your own organization. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt to go into some more specific details and examples for us.
And thanks, Ginny. I appreciate the rollover to me. To kind of piggyback a lot of what she said, and I saw this great quote, perfect is the enemy of good. No visualization or no data is going to ever be perfect, but it should be able to answer a series of questions that really tie back to your business strategy. I like this quote too. Challenging the status quo takes commitment, courage, imagination, and above all, dedication to learning. 2 years ago, I started out at the SFA, never touching Power BI. And now I'm using it every day, all day, and kind of challenging how my organization uses it from an analytics perspective. So one of the things that Ginny mentioned before about, let's just deviate for a half a second regarding the webinar, but talking about new revenue streams. You have to remember my organization focuses on, and our main revenue stream is having food shows each year. So we're talking about hands-on food tasting, one in California, one in New York, where our members are showcasing their products to buyers and other food service people. So when we have a pandemic that has shut down our country and we need to rethink things, we had when I tell people we had a virtual tasting event about a month ago and it was hugely successful. So I challenge you and your association to really, I'm stealing this from like Taco Bell, but to think outside the bun or think outside the box on how your organization approaches things, because new challenges will arise within the next few months and years that will challenge your organization. So I think that, as you use the analytics, I saw a couple of you said they never use dashboards and analytics to make decisions. I was a little taken back by that, because I question whether those are sound decisions or not if you're not using any sort of analytics to base your decisions on. So over the next couple minutes, I'm going to go through a PowerPoint, a Power BI dashboard that I created, go through some of the notes and kind of tie back to some of the things that Ginny talked about. And hopefully you guys can understand that Power BI sounds like this most massive software, but at its core, it's really kind of easy to use. So I'm going to switch over to my screen and then and share. All right. Can everyone see this? We're good?
Yep, very good.
All right. So I did everything. Even I know Bill wanted to use PowerPoint, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to do everything in Power BI. So here, I just wanted to kind of tie back to what Ginny said. There are really 3 keys to your success. Data does not have to be perfect. You need to balance your short-term and your long-term, your strategy and your metrics that your company is going to use. And then you can define your success differently, whether it's short-term or long-term. But some of the things that I really do, and I didn't do this before in my other jobs, and I really started to do now, is I started to answer some of these questions here, but I do it with the group that I'm kind of creating these dashboards and reports for. Like, consider your audience. Who's the audience? Is it somebody that's somebody works in our marketing department, or is it the board, or is it somebody at a higher at a different level? Is it the executive team? Choosing KPIs that kind of tie back to that strategy. What are our goals as an organization? Are we trying to talk about and be a champion for fancy food, or are we doing something else? And then talking about diving into the context, choosing the right chart, choosing simple layouts to your Power BI that really start to answer the questions. A lot of people are like, let's just take 50 different metrics. We're going to throw them all in the same chart. And then people have no idea what they're looking at. And really prioritize simplicity when you do it. Even a few metrics can say a lot about what you're doing for an organization. When you're talking about colors, when you also, from a simplicity perspective, you want to really limit it to like 3 or 4 colors and not have things that are contrast to each other. And then just try and be consistent between your labeling, your numbers on there. And then I always say that never stop evolving. I mean, my first dashboard I ever did was I look back on it, it was terrible. But you know what? It's a great starting point for me as I did, when I started doing my Power BI development. And then think about it when you're doing it. What are the expectations when you're done? What is the strategy of your organization? What are we trying to accomplish by creating the dashboard or the report that we did? And then in that case, we're arming the organization with these tools. Now remember, and I heard this literally yesterday from Jordan Morrow on a conference that I was on, tool is not the strategy, it's an enabler. So Power BI is not your strategy, or Tableau is not your strategy. It's the way that you can enable your organization to meet its goals. And then one of the things, when I meet with the people in my organization to talk about these dashboards and things, there is a huge data literacy gap. Most of these people focus on their job. They know about marketing. They know about clicks and emails that were sent out and received. And people know their own little world sometimes. And sometimes we need to kind of blend those worlds so that everyone can kind of understand and talk about the data so that we can answer and make it an informed decision, and ultimately have an informed decision as a culture, and we can create decisions on. And the last thing he said was, for everybody that's involved, not just the person that's developing the dashboard, be curious, be creative, and really use critical thinking as it ties back to your organization and its strategy. So I wanted to just kind of go through what I will show you is a really simple data set. It has customers who purchased some products, and on the same time, we sent some emails out to the same group of people, and there were a couple of different marketing metrics, whether they were sent a message, they received it, they clicked on it, and that was really it. There's only 10,000 rows in our products and sales information, and there's only about 8,000 rows in our marketing information. but I created this where it was 4 different tabs of this Power BI report to answer a lot of questions. So the way I like to approach it, and I know some of you can see at the bottom, I like this approach where I put a lot of my notes in here. I don't have any notes in here now, but I created a page. Hey, maybe I had a conversation with my marketing team to talk about this. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to start creating some notes. My next one is I always like a top navigation report. Very simple. It talks about the three major components to what this report is. I have an email campaign summary. I have some product sales analysis, and then I combined it to create like what overlaying our sales and our marketing features. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the first one. Since a lot of you over the course of the last 6 months have probably done some massive email campaigns to either bring in your membership or you're expanding your sales. Maybe you were doing a virtual event. So let's look at this. Okay. Very simple. There's a lot of information here, and I'll kind of dissect it a little bit. Over here, we talk about email campaigns that we've done. So somebody's looking at this can say, okay, let me look at the year over, the month over month. How many emails did we send? What was received? What was clicked? And then you can look at the top and see just kind of the different viz that you can use here to show you that there were 1,100 emails that were received, the opens and the totals of it. And then on the side here and on the bottom, you can look over time, different emails that were sent and crossing over and showing how many different sales that we had. So from a top line perspective, somebody can easily look at this and say, wow, we did $1 million in sales. There were 2,300 emails sent. Our open rate, a lot of people within marketing departments know that there's certain opening rates that are kind of thresholds to success. And maybe it's 20%, maybe it's 25%. The first thing they look on there and say, oh my God, we're killing it with our open rates and our clicks and our click rates. So these are metrics that certain departments will know immediately. Now, maybe when I met with a marketing person, if I was creating this for them, I could sit with them and say, are there thresholds, are there KPIs or things that your targets are when you send your emails out over the course of a calendar year? Maybe, they may be able to shed some light on it. Listen, I'm the first one to admit, I don't know all of them. I don't even know some of them. But when I sit with these person, to me, when I'm building these, some of these things are just, they're numbers, but they may mean something to somebody else. So I always tell people, listen, don't just get a request for a project and a dashboard and say, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to type it, I'm going to build something up and then hand it over to them and say, this is what you want. No, you should really get them involved in the process. And then they'll be able to help you and say, you know what, you should show this, or you should show this.
Hey, Matt, can I interrupt for a quick question?
Sure.
So everybody, if you take a look on the right side of the screen, there's something called fields. And so that's kind of like all the data that Matt's using for his visualization here. So it looks like to me, Matt, that you're using quite a few measures on your dashboard. Yep. I wonder if you could explain for the benefit of the people on the call is, what are some of the measures that you're using here, and kind of what is a measure, and how did you create some of these?
Sure. So a measure is taking some of your data and doing some summation, some counting of it. And one of the things that I do, and I'm going to steal this term, I hate to say, from somebody I've watched numerous webinars on, is something called measure branching. If you look it up. So a lot of the times what I'll do is I will develop like 4 or 5 metrics that are the basis, and I'll call it the foundation to everything I'm going to build. And all of the other metrics are branched off of that. So like, for instance, total sales here, probably used in 90% of my my dashboards. And you can see it up top in here. It's literally taking the sum, looking at my table sales and summing up the sales. Now, when you add that to a dashboard and you're going to put on, let's say, a product, or you're going to put on a date on it, it will start to slice and dice it based on that. And that's really at the core of how Power BI works is the ability to build things, simple ones, total sales, and then you can start to layer it on to answer a tremendous amount of questions.
Mhm.
Hopefully
And
that's where
yeah,
you're
and
going.
yeah, it was exactly. And so you build this measure one time, and then you can see that he's going to use those same measures, multiple times throughout all these different charts here. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean,
thank you
here,
for that.
I'll just show you like real quick. If I do here, if I drag sales on here, so everyone can look that in my, if I take the sales, the total of all the sales across all rows in the data set is $5 million. Well, now I'm just going to convert this to a table. So it's still $5 million. But if I add, let's say, customer name to this table, now you're going to see it broken down by all the customers. The total still at the bottom is still the same one we had before, but now you can see the total of all the sales for all of my customers broken down by customer. And this is how Power BI works. I know or some people think that it's such a complex thing. It's really not. The core of it, a lot of the things that Excel did, which most people use Excel all day, every day, are here. It just may be a little bit more as far as your knowledge base to be able to execute that.
Great, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So the next kind of thing I want to talk about is this. I layered another aspect of it. Now I'm taking it from a little bit more of a top level, where I was talking about email campaigns, where I was really looking at a holistic view of our campaigns and our sales. Now I'm starting to break it down to look at, here are the individual customers, what their sales were. We just saw those a minute ago, and you could saw that $5 million. How many orders that they placed in that time, and then matching it up against emails, open rates, and some click rates from the marketing perspective. Now, one of the other beautiful things about this data only covers 1 calendar year. But up at the top, you can say, well, maybe I want to look at what we did in March. So I can click on March, and then every one of my visualizations will start to adjust based on what I clicked on in that. And that's the beauty of Power BI. It allows you to do and slice and dice the information just on the fly. And I'm just going to unclick it for a second. So this really, this viz really dove into the customer, the email campaign, but at a customer level. And the last one I really did was at the product level. So it just talks about, we have different products, different levels of consulting and training and networking to in the sample data set. And you can kind of see the sales over the course of the year, cumulative sales. You can see how it broke out by different products, networking, $500,000. So these were using a lot of the inherent visualizations and ones that people use, line graphs, bar graphs, that people use I'll use it out of the box. Now I'm going to kind of roll into the next slide, or the next 2 different pieces of the Power BI, and talk about some of the newer ones, and how Power BI development from Microsoft is going, which is enabling people to do even deeper analysis, whether you knew it or not. So let's talk about the other one. So a couple different things. They created this new so-called a KPI metric, or I'm sorry, viz. And so you can see this particular, you can see that there's sales, and you can see how it's overlaid in the background of the sales by month. This is just a quick one that does it by state. You can see it's shaded darker, and you can hover over it. You can see the sales by state. This I used because we did it as like the typical marketing funnel, looking at emails sent, received, and open. Not out of the box, but I was able to create fairly easily what I deemed as the top 50 customers, the top 50 to 100, and then the rest. So you can see that you can easily, this probably took me 5 minutes to do. You can segment your customers, your products for like top selling products versus your bottom selling products. And this one on the top, this looks like your typical slicer you might see in Excel. This actually, I downloaded this It's called the Chiclet Slicer. Every day, companies and individuals are creating visualizations that are able to be imported into Power BI. So it can enhance I downloaded actually 5 last night. Enhance your visualizations and the learning that and kind of tying it back to your strategy and how you want to show it. And the last one I'll talk about is, this is just an image, but I took it from a visualization that I saw on insurance. So everybody knows or potentially has an insurance broker. Now, where Power BI and Microsoft is heading is really that, even though most people don't know the core of it, they talk about machine learning and really in taking your analytics to the next level. So what this is called a key influencers visualization. So what this is saying here is, up here at the top says, what influences client satisfaction to be not satisfied. So in this visualization this is just an image. It's basically saying, if for the people to not be satisfied, those people that have the broker as Daniel Harris are 6.73 times more likely to be unsatisfied than satisfied. So it's allowing people to dive into why things are happening. Why was your sales affected negatively or positively for a particular month or a year? Maybe what you don't know, it's starting to answer the questions for you that you didn't do before, or maybe need a little help with. So
too bad for Daniel Harris.
But
too bad for Daniel Harris, right?
Yeah, if I'm a company, I'm going to fire him. No, but I want everyone to think like Power BI. Like I said, 2 years ago, I never even touched the product. And now I'm developing all these dashboards for our diversity stuff at work. We're looking at our education on our webinars. We look at when we were doing it, our shows. We're looking at our engagement from our members when we're at the show. So there's so many different avenues that you can go down with Power BI. Listen, I always say people start small, and you'll be able to do a lot. Now, I don't know if everyone's looking at me or looking at you can click off this for a second, Bill. I just want a shameless plug for something.
Okay, go for it.
So a lot of people think that there's so much to learn. So I'm going to kind of point out 2 books that are Power BI, 1 book that's Power BI related and 1 that's not. One, sorry. Is this book, Storytelling with Data?
Oh yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one.
Is one of my favorite books. It really dives into a lot of the core of trying to tell a story when you're doing your dashboards. The second one I'm going to go with is Data Story by Nancy Duarte. Another one about taking your data and telling a story. And then for those people, this is my Bible. When you start to get into Power BI and talking about DAX, which is really the core of Power BI, you can go with Marco Russo's, if you can see it, Definitive Guide to DAX, is essential to me as far as doing my development. So for those people out there, listen, challenge yourself. There's so much possibilities about what you can do within Power BI. Hopefully I shed some light on some stuff. For those people after, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to provide my contact information. And Bill, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, if you'll just unshare the screen, then I'll grab it back.
Yep, back to you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so this is where we're going to just quickly, segue back into Ginny's piece to wrap it up. So again, thinking about all of what Matt was doing with actually, planning and developing and presenting around specific data for specific business questions. So Jenny's piece to kind of take us home here is going to be how to get started with that, and then on the other end, kind of once you get there, what are some other things that you can do to take it from something that is essentially something that you do out of interest, right? And just getting like one or two visualizations up to something that can be more organization wide, right? It can be something that becomes the norm for your organization. So with that, I'm going to turn things back to Ginny.
Thanks, Bill. And thanks so much, Matt. You are such a talented analyst, and I always love looking at your dashboards because they give me so many ideas. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. And as Bill mentioned, to bring us home, I'm just going to talk about how you can really do this on your own. And to give you a little bit of a background, my background is in applied economics. So I have a research brain at heart. And when I approach anything, I really approach it as if it's a research topic or a research subject. And in developing business intelligence tools or just developing simple visualizations, the process is really the same as approaching it as a research problem. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the methods that I personally use. While these are my personal methods, these are a lot of what I'm going to share today is very common throughout the data and analytics space. And a lot of these things are also things that you can adapt to your own. So as I'm going through this, think about, what may work for you and your organization that you could take, or things that may work if they're tweaked a little bit. So, that's one of the things that I always like to share is a lot of these are frameworks that you can adjust to fit to what you need. So the first thing when you're thinking about developing a visualization or some sort of BI tool is to start with the objective. So, and if you're going to start with the objective, you have to start with who your business users are. So start by defining who is going to be using your tool, and not just, the names, but what are the functional areas, the departments, the job descriptions of the users that are going to be using the product. And then make sure that you understand their needs and their questions. In product development, we build user stories, and a user story essentially is an end goal that describes the type of user, what they want, and why. So I recommend doing something like this as you're thinking about developing visualizations. And I have a couple here on the screen, and I'll just read the first one. But a user story can be something like, as an events manager, I need to know how many registrants are using comped or discounted registration codes. So if you're thinking about building a visualization around that, you have exactly who the person is. So understanding what level of detail they may want. As an events manager, it's probably going to be pretty low level of detail, as opposed to if it was, your CFO who maybe just needs some high level metrics. Exactly what they're trying to understand. So registrations, and then you're also knowing what types of details around that they're looking for, so the different types of registration codes. Think about things like that as you're thinking about what the content will be. The next thing to do is then consider the specific requirements and the content itself. So this now gets into the data, and there's a method that is called model storming, which is to essentially try to build your data model. And on the left side of the slide, I have an example of what data or model storming looks like. And it's essentially taking your user stories or taking your different business questions and then identifying the who, what, when, where, and why, and how many. So for example, we have the user story or the business question, how many members did not renew? So identifying who we're talking about. We're talking about our customers or our members. What are we talking about? We're talking about a membership transaction, a member type. When is the date? When is it happening? Or in this case, not happening. And then things like where, so that's getting into the transaction and why, and that's getting to maybe some of the more behavioral or demographic or dimensional data. So if you take all of your user stories or your business questions that you're trying to answer and think through those things, then you're able to get an idea of exactly what data points you're going to need to answer that question. You'll be able to touch on if you have them or not. And then you'll be able to, compile them together and create a data model to develop your visualizations from, so that you know that you have everything you need. And then you'll start sketching out the content. And on the right side of the page, I have actually a paper prototype of Acumen. So if anyone uses the Acumen community product, this is the overview page. This is the first draft of the overview page. And again, this is something that I really recommend, is putting pen to paper and thinking about, okay, I understand what my users need. I understand what data I have, and I need to answer those questions. Now let me think about what that content looks like. What are going to be the most compelling visualizations that I can use to address that content? What is going to fit together? What would those visualizations look like? For, if we're looking at something that's comparing a metric over time, we're probably going to want a line chart. If we're looking at something that is comparing different types of categorizations of, of something we're looking at, we may want a stacked or clustered bar chart. If we're looking at a piece of a whole, a percentage, we may want a pie chart or a donut chart or something else. So think about all those things and think about what type of visualization is going to best represent what you're after. And I do want to just stress to not get hung up on the modeling. I know that if this can be a little bit scary if you don't have a technical background, to be thinking about, oh my goodness, you're saying I have to be thinking about all of these different elements of the data. I have to pull it all together. I have to model it. And I'll just say that it is not as complicated as it sounds. I have a technical background in that I know enough to be dangerous, but I am not a coder. My strengths come from identifying how data fits together and what the commonalities are. And that's really all you need. And tools like Power BI make that really simple. And what I'm showing here is that on Association Analytics's COVID dashboard, we took 4 very different data sets, some that we had internally, some that we were importing from third-party platforms like the US Census or USA Facts, publicly available platforms. We were putting together some measures, and we pulled them all together, and we're able to create something just by having the knowledge of what the common link between those 4 was. So really that's something that anyone can do, and tools like Power BI or any type of analytics platform make that really accessible for anyone to do. And then finally, you have your users, your user stories, you have your data, you have a prototype of what you want to develop, you have the visualizations you want to develop. The last step is to really think about the user experience or the design. So think about the flow of your content and the story that you're trying to tell, and then build your content to match that flow. Also consider page layout. So think about who's using your product, and think about what should be above the fold. So what is that most important information that when I am looking at my visualizations, I'm going to see right away, versus things that are a little bit more of that supporting material, and design the page to reflect that. So it's really obvious what is the most important. And then the things that are maybe interesting, but a little bit less important are, taking up a little less real estate, or maybe they're lower down on the page and aren't the first thing that is going to catch the user's eyes. And then finally, create consistency between your pages and reports. And this will make the end user experience so much better, and it'll make them know what to anticipate and what to expect. And you saw that in the report that Matt showed, where it was very consistent coloring, consistent layout. We have a slide here that's showing Acumen, 3 very different products, but you can see they essentially look the same. And we do that on purpose to create that consistency and to create that ease of user experience.
All right. Thank you very much, Ginny. This is almost the end here. I just want to quickly recap some of the resources. So Matt was kind enough to put together this list for us. I mean, as he said, he's only been at this a couple of years, and he's really become quite an expert at this in a short time. So he shared some of the books that got him there, and then here's also some resources. So there on the left are mostly, BI related educational resources. On the right are tools that can help you with design and other things, such as, layout, icons, images, things like that. Anything that you want to add to these, Matt, or anyone that you want to speak to specifically?
Yeah, I can real quick. That top one that I posted, that enterprise DNA, for those that are really starting out, that was the core and the foundation site that I used. They usually do multiple summits over the course of the year. It's usually a quarterly thing, but they definitely do monthly, like 1 hour. There's actually one at 4 o'clock today, to do different things. Some levels are more on an advanced side, but all of them, they provide the dashboards and the underlying information and data for it. So, I mean, you can literally take it and dissect it from top to bottom, however you see fit. But the person who does their webinars is as educated and clear as possible. It's actually a company that's based in, I think it's New Zealand or Australia, and it's really good product as far as going to their site. I happen to have a membership to them, and it's not that expensive, but they have a ton of learning platform to be able to go from beginner to advanced very quickly with it. That's one of my favorites.
Awesome. All right. And then we have people, right? So, these are people that, that have influenced you, Matt, that you follow, that you read their articles, things like that. Anything in particular? And this recording will be available. So, I mean, you don't feel like you have to write all these names down or anything. You can always go back to this and look up these individuals and find out what they have to say about data and analytics. Anything, any one name on here that jumps out, Matt, that's particularly important if somebody's, doesn't have time to look into all of them?
No, I really enjoy listening to Jordan Morrow, and Scott Taylor is a super engaging guy. If you follow, I mean, most of these people you can follow. I follow a lot of them on LinkedIn. But those two, and then Sam Mackay is the guy from Enterprise DNA. They have a YouTube channel, by the way. Just definitely follow some of these people, and I'd be surprised if you guys, your data careers didn't, go up exponentially as far as your knowledge base, because they all lend they always bring something to the table.
Cool. Yeah, and many of these resources are free. We should point out, right? I mean, you can spend money on this, but you definitely can get started for free. All right. So with that, I'm going to give both of our panelists a shot at 1 or 2 closing thoughts, just key takeaways that you want to make sure people leave today's webinar with. I'll give you first shot, Matt.
For those people, I posted my email. Listen, I always like to pay it forward because somebody helped me along the way. So seriously, no matter how hard or difficult or easy the question is, feel free to reach out to me. Listen, we're all a part of associations in a challenging time. So listen, send me any questions, concerns. You have something with a dashboard, even simple DAX questions, whatever it is, send it my way. I'll be more than happy to assist you, because, like I said, I like to pay it forward. Thank you, Matt.
Ginny?
Yeah, I think I'm going to touch on something that Matt said when he was talking about how SFA has been, thinking outside the bun or the box on their visualizations. And that is that I think the data and analytics space gets stereotyped in terms of thinking that everyone that's involved in it is, not creative, and that data and analytics shouldn't be creative. But I would counter that and say that a really big part of successful visualization and successful business intelligence tool is to think creatively and to think outside the box. So I would recommend that anyone who is feeling inspired by today's talk and is thinking about how they can do this at their organizations to really try to harness your creativity when it comes to visualizations and data.
Cool. Thank you, Ginny. Okay, so that wraps it up. We're right at time here. We're deviating from the usual schedule a little bit so that our next webinar is on November the 19th at 3 p.m. Have 2 really interesting panelists. Everyone, I'm sure, knows Reddy Henry from ASAE. We'll also be joined by Farah Francis from ASCD. And basically what we're going to talk about here is kind of what's going on with COVID. What are some of the silver linings, right? As leaders and as association professionals, what are some of the changes that we've had to make what have been the result of those, and what's going to endure kind of after COVID is kind of in the rearview mirror. So thank you to all our participants. Special thanks to Matt and Ginny, our panelists. Wish you all happy Halloween and a great rest of the day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for the invite again, Bill.
Thanks, everyone.